Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron. I hope you're having a great day or night in Jesus. Hollywood Traitors, recommended by M. Stanton Evans, good historian, and Coulter, who has a lot of logical things, and John Gizzi, House correspondent and chief political columnist for Newsmax. So let's get started. This is an amazing book. Hollywood Traitors, Blacklisted Screenwriters, Agents of Stalin, Allies of Hitler. It's by Alan H. Riskin, editor-at-large of Human Events. It's put out by Reaganry History. And I think Jack Sobiek has Human Events now, basically. Maybe Coulter some as well. And just a fascinating book here. So the Hollywood insiders who supported Stalin and Hitler. Let's look a little bit at this flyleaf. So there's a myth about the Hollywood blacklist, and perhaps even you've fallen for it. According to legend, noble Hollywood figures, creative screenwriters, brilliant directors, and beloved actors were dragged before the dreaded House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, and grilled on their personal beliefs and associations in flagrant violation of the First Amendment. Only by taking the Fifth could they escape turning informant against their innocent friends and colleagues. The brave and conscientious Hollywood 10 were the heroes of the hour. They refused to name names of communists in Hollywood, most of whom were simply slightly misguided liberals, according to legend, and were jailed for contempt of Congress. And then, in what was a terrible loss for the cinematic art, they were completely shut out working in Hollywood. Now, however, you can learn the real story from authoritative source, longtime Human Events editor Alan Riskin. That was Ronald Reagan's favorite magazine, Human Events, who, as the son of Marx Brothers screenwriter Maury Riskin, that's an insider's insider, because wasn't Groucho Marx like a communist or something? He was brilliant. Grew up in Hollywood, knew many of the key players in this real-life Hollywood drama. Riskin reveals how the alleged victims of the Hollywood blacklist were actually ideological thugs, enthusiastic Stalinists, committed to bringing about a socialist utopia in America. And movies are a way to do that. What a propaganda tool. Didn't was it Max Horkheimer and some of those that really, maybe Tavistock, there's a name that's escaping me right now that they kind of accused of writing the Beatles music and all this. But I doubt he did. But violent revolution if necessary. These screenwriters prostitute their talent in service of communist propaganda, which included pro-Nazi propaganda. You know, Hitler was a socialist. I've been reading up on that. I mean, they were like everything for the state. You know, Mussolini, everything for the state, nothing against the state. And so that's definitely not classical liberalism. So this was done in 2015. So let's look at the table of contents, and then we'll just go into some specifics you might be interested in. Fascinating time in history. And I've noticed that a lot of times, you know, to the victors go the myth and monuments. Communists are very, they want, and Orwell brought this out in 1984, they want to control how they're perceived in history. And so, like Lenin and all this. Maury Riskin, Hollywood anti-communist, and my father. The Stalinist 10, the birth of Screenwriters Guild, communism must be fought for, anti-fascist or pro-Stalin. You could have been against Hitler and against communism. The Hollywood Anti-Nazi League, the Pro-Hitler Congress, Red and Brown Sabotage, the American Peace Mobilization Goes to War, Red Propaganda in Films. That's interesting. Blockade, the party targets Spain, for whom the bell tolls. Hemingway, fighting in Spain. Ninotchka slips through a red filter, Red Heyday in Hollywood, Mission for Stalin, and it keeps going on. Like it's got Arthur Miller, was he or wasn't he? Donald Ogden Stewart, Hollywood revolutionary, John Howard Lawson, the Communist Party's grand poobah, curious case of Michael Blankford, Reds on the blacklist, rehabilitating ex-Reds, on and so forth. And it's a fascinating picture section. It's just really gripped me here, this picture section. It's really amazing because it starts out with Bogey and Bacall marching. I think Bacall was kind of pro-communist, but I'm not sure if she was just a dupe or what. Just amazing stuff. And again, the guy writing this was an insider's insider. Riskin. So just some amazing stuff. Now, on some of these pictures, like The Majestic, a 2001 Hollywood film starring Jim Carrey, is an unrelenting attack against the House Un-American Activities Committee and tosses a bouquet to screenwriter John Howard Lawson, the enforcer of the communist line in Hollywood. Now, you have to remember, the communists at this time are enslaving hundreds of millions in the Soviet Union and China, killing many tens of millions. So they're mass murderers. So when you say, well, I'm defending communists, you're defending mass murderers. Famous director Edward Drotrike was the only one of the Hollywood 10 to renounce communism. Stalin and the Soviet Union. In his appearance before HUAC in April 1951, Dmitrik said he had become convinced the Communist Party in America was treasonable. Now, Arthur Miller, who we mentioned before, and his wife, you guessed it, Marilyn Monroe. She was also married to Joe DiMaggio, who Ted Williams says was the greatest baseball player he ever saw. In his appearance before HUAC in June 1956, the playwright told committee members he could not recall whether he had ever applied for membership in the Commie Party. Gerhard Eisler, the overwhelming majority of the Hollywood 10 were enthusiastic supporters of Eisler, a leading Comintern, that's Communist International agent, who fled the United States in 1945 rather than stand trial for perjury, and ended up as a chief propagandist for East Germany. Tip Harburg, the lyricist for The Wizard of Oz, the Yellow Brick Road, claimed Eisler was framed. So, just all kinds of stuff. Where was this other one? There it was. So Ronald Reagan played a major role in limiting communist influence in Hollywood. So Sterling Hayden, a former communist himself, called Reagan a one-man battalion against the Reds. Here's Reagan. Didn't he play like Newt Rockney on the radio or something? Before HUAC in the 1947 hearings about Red infiltration of the Screen Actors Guild, which had recently elected him as president. So here is novelist and screenwriter Ayn Rand, I hear it pronounced different ways, a Russian emigre, informs HUAC in 1947 in a detailed critique that 1944 Hollywood film Song of Russia, written by Communist Party members Richard Collins and Paul Jericho, was loaded with communist propaganda. If you want individualism, Ayn Rand, your person, man. And so it's even got old Uncle Joe, the mass murderer. U.S. Ambassador to Moscow Joseph Davies, Walter Houston, meets Joseph Stalin, Maynard Kippen, uncredited, in the 1943 Hollywood film Mission to Moscow, perhaps the most pro-Soviet movie ever made, even in the Soviet Union. Written by Howard Koch. I hope it's not of the Koch brothers or Koch brothers, who had married a communist. The film portrays Stalin as extremely kind and wise ruler who transformed a backward country into an industrial powerhouse. The purges, the invasion of Finland, the Soviet collective farm system, the whole of Damar killing 7 million, the Hitler-Stalin pact were all excused or praised. Even the pro-Soviet Nation magazine called it a whitewash. In reality, when Hitler invaded in Operation Barbarossa, we now know, Army War College and all this, that actually the Soviet Union was fixing to invade Germany and thought that they could sweep the entire field of Europe, and Hitler took them by surprise. And this is why they made it so quickly to Moscow, because they had all their offensive weapons up front, but they weren't expecting a blitzkrieg. And so all of a sudden, Germany's got so much of the Soviet army, and that Stalin broke down, and wasn't it Averell Harriman of Brown Brothers Harriman went and actually had to run the Soviet Union for a couple years because Stalin suffered a nervous breakdown, something along those lines. And so Stalin's just an evil person. I read Stalin one time. He said all his political enemies and his purges, all the show trials, he would actually watch sometimes, unbeknownst to the, either disguised in the crowd or behind two-way mirrors. And he said that he would have to think of them excreting on themselves the worst way so he could do it. It's got a wonderful picture in here of Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart lead a group of motion picture stars in the nation's capital to protest HUAC's 1947 hearings on communist infiltration of Hollywood. Under studio pressure, Bogart would later apologize for his actions. Now you have to realize too, Soviet Union was our ally at this time. So it's just a book by book, chapter by chapter, incredible, good print, well over 400 pages, has an appendix with, who's who, alphabetized, incredible footnotes in the back. What can I say? This is a great book you may want to read for history. I think it's a valuable book. And for us Holiness Pentecostals, we've always been right about movies, TV, and all this. God bless you. We love you. See you later. Bye-bye.